Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this is the Culips English Podcast. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Culips. This is Simplified Speech. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, let me explain. Simplified Speech is our series featuring clear, natural, and easy to understand conversations. And today, we are going to talk about hiking, trekking, and climbing. But before we get into that, I want to let everyone know that there is a study guide available for this episode. And guys, we really recommend that you study along with the guide while you listen to us here today. Inside the guide, you'll find a transcript along with detailed explanations, descriptions, and examples of the key vocabulary that you'll hear us use. There's also a quiz and some prompts that you can use for speaking or writing practice. There's a lot of good stuff in the guide. And to download it, you just need to sign up and become a Culips member, which you can do on our website, culips.com. I'm not alone today. This is not a solo podcast. I'm joined by Jeremy. Hey there, Jeremy.
Hey there, Andrew. So, what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, well, we're talking about hiking, trekking, and climbing, and the inspiration for this episode comes from one of our listeners from Japan, Mina. And Mina wrote to us and said, "Hello, Andrew, Cassie, Suzanne, and Jeremy. I'm Mina, and I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 years. I really enjoy your podcast and Instagram. Thank you for always giving such wonderful episodes. I have a question about the words hiking, trekking, climbing, and things like that. How can we differentiate between these words? I like to go to the mountains, and I think I should use hike a mountain for short trails. Can I use the word hike for multiple day trips? Thanks." Okay, so thank you, Mina, for that question and message. It's very nice to hear that you are a longtime listener. So, Jeremy, why don't we get into it first by talking about the differences in these three words, hiking, trekking, climbing, and then we'll talk a little bit about our own experience doing these things.
Sure.
So let's start with the word hike. What does it mean to hike?
Well, I think that Mina is right in assuming that a hike is sort of a shorter trip, a shorter activity. Actually, I have also heard the word hike to mean sort of to pull up something. For example, if I'm wearing long pants and I want to walk in the water, I might hike up my pants so that I can walk through the water. This means that I pull my pants up, maybe pull the bottom of my pants up to my knees so that my pants don't get wet in the water. So hiking also seems to have the meaning of going up.
Exactly. Jeremy, I think of when I hear you say hike up your pants. You know, when I was a high school student, it was really cool and fashionable for students to wear their pants really low and baggy. And so our teachers always told us to hike up our pants, to pull them up around our waist and not wear them down low. And so I think you're right that embedded in this word is this nuance of going up. So in my head, when I think of doing the activity, hiking, it means going to a mountain, walking up the mountain, and then walking back home, walking down the mountain, going up and coming down. And usually a hike is a one-day trip. It could be longer, but I think for most people, a hike is just, an activity that you can do in one day.
Well, if we contrast this with the word trek or trekking, I think this will help it make more sense. Trek is usually something that is a multi-day trip. So you will pack a big backpack with food and water and cooking supplies and sleeping supplies. And you will hike or walk to a destination that is far away and requires multiple days to get there. So it also seems to indicate that there is a destination that you are trying to get to.
Right. So you could go trekking in northern Canada to the North Pole, trek to the North Pole, or you could trek through the Himalayan mountains, maybe to get to the top of Mount Everest. And of course, that is a multiple day, very difficult trip to do.
But I have to be honest, in most of my life, I have only used the word hike. Even when I went on a 2-day hike or a 3-day hike, I still said hike. And I really came into contact with the word trek or trekking when I lived in South Korea and I met English speakers from other countries. Was that the same for you, Andrew?
Yeah, maybe this is just where we grew up, Jeremy, because we both grew up on the west coast of North America, and I think we all kind of speak similarly in this region. So I also only used the word hike until I started traveling and met people from other countries use this word. So yeah, to me, I actually don't use the word trek very often. I just use the word hike. That doesn't mean that trek isn't an English word. It is a very fine word, but I personally don't use it.
Yeah, the only way that I use the word trek is to emphasize how long a certain journey is. So, for example, when I lived in Seoul, South Korea, if I wanted to go from my house to go visit Andrew where he lives, even though it isn't a very far distance, I still had to take 2 buses and a subway, and it took a long time to do those things. So I would say, I'm sorry, Andrew, I can't hang out today. I can't make the trek out to your place tonight. So I use that word to emphasize how long and difficult the trip is.
Exactly. That is how I always use the word too, not to talk about the activity of walking a long distance somewhere through the forest and the mountains, but to journey from place A to place B inside the city using a car or public transportation, and usually in a negative way, like, oh, I don't want to go there. It's a long trek. You know, it's like it takes too long to go to that place. So a trek in this sense is like just a difficult journey that we don't want to do because it takes too long. Of course, there's also the popular TV show Star Trek. I personally haven't seen Star Trek before. How about you, Jeremy? Have you ever watched Star Trek?
Yeah, my dad watched it a lot when I was a kid, so it was always on TV in my house.
Okay.
But that as well relates to this meaning. Star Trek means a long journey through the stars, usually to a designated place.
Mm-hmm.
But it emphasizes the long journey, whereas star hike would not make any sense, right?
Exactly. So in Mina's situation here, where she says that she goes up into the mountains for a 1-day activity, then the best word to use is hike. And I would really only reserve trek for a multiple day trip that's very difficult, very long, and perhaps you're also camping outside or you're staying overnight. This kind of very difficult activity. So the last activity that Mina asked about is climbing. So what is the difference between hiking and climbing? Because they both involve going up. But how are they different?
Well, you can go for a hike, and on that hike, you can climb up the mountain. And I think climbing can have 2 meanings, really. One is like rock climbing, where you are actually scaling the side of a mountain, and this can be very dangerous and very exciting, and you need special equipment for this kind of climbing.
Mm-hmm. You are using your hands and feet to physically pull and push yourself up the mountain cliff, the side of a cliff on a mountain.
A vertical surface, usually, right?
Exactly.
But it can also mean that you are simply making your way up to a higher altitude by walking on a path. So we hiked this mountain or we climbed this mountain. Both of those mean pretty much the same thing to me. Do you agree, Andrew?
They mean the same thing for me as well. So usually we go for a hike, but we climb a mountain. So for example, Jeremy, if you ask me like, oh, Andrew, what did you do last weekend? I could say, I hiked Mount Boucherie. Mount Boucherie is a mountain in my neighborhood in my hometown. I hiked Mount Boucherie or I climbed Mount Boucherie. I think, Jeremy, you will know that I'm not a rock climber, so you would automatically assume that I hiked it, that I walked up and down it. However, if I was a mountain climber, then maybe you would have to ask for clarification. Did you actually pull yourself up with your hands and feet, or did you walk it?
Yeah, I think also if you look at a mountain, usually they're not a completely vertical surface. There is a slope, right? And maybe some vertical surfaces. But I recently met someone who is very into rock climbing, who is a rock climber, and he just referred to it as climbing. He said, do you climb? You should get into climbing. And he referred to that whole sport of rock climbing as just climbing. So it depends on context. Of course, I know you, and I know you don't rock climb. So I would assume, he hiked up and down the mountain.
I think also we would reserve the word climb for a taller mountain. Like when I visited Japan, I climbed Mount Fuji. We could say hike, but to me, it was more arduous and more difficult than a regular hike. So this is why I would say climb. But I think both are interchangeable and you don't really need to stress out about the details between them because English speakers will use them interchangeably all the time.
Yeah, they usually sell shirts at the bottom of famous mountains that say, I climbed Mount whatever, right?
Yes, I climbed Mount McKinley or something like this. Although there's probably not very many tourist shops at the bottom of Mount McKinley, a big mountain in Alaska, I think.
Yeah, it depends where you are, but still.
Jeremy, you said that you did a 2-day hike before.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you do this hike?
It was near Lake Tahoe, which is a famous lake on the border of California, the state of California, and the state of Nevada in the United States. We had a backpack that had food and sleeping supplies and a tent and all that. And we hiked 12 miles in, and we stayed there for a full day. After 2 nights, we hiked out.
Wow, that's awesome. And how was it? Was it fun? Was it too difficult? I've never done an overnight hiking trip like that before.
I actually really enjoyed it. Of course, it was difficult. You have to have the right shoes and gear and things like that. But I really enjoyed it. And at the time, I said, I'm definitely going to do this again. But I didn't end up doing it again. And now I think I have to wait until my son is a little bit older before we can do a hike like that again.
It could be a good father-son bonding experience, though. A couple days in the woods, a nice long hike like that. I'm sure you will probably enjoy doing something like that when your son is a bit older.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that already.
Jeremy, you mentioned gear just a moment ago, and I have a funny story to share about hiking gear because just this week, one of my friends sent me an instant message and she was laughing a lot and saying, "Oh my God, what is this? What is this?" Because about 3 or 4 years ago, I was at the airport in Incheon in Korea, getting ready to go on a trip to Taiwan. I was going to visit Taiwan for the weekend. And when I was there, I got interviewed by a local news station here in Korea. And the question that they asked me is, why do you think Korean people, especially middle-aged and older Korean people, like to wear so much bright hiking clothes when they go traveling? And I didn't really clue in, but when I was asked that question, I looked around at the airport and I saw many groups of older Korean people that were traveling together in a kind of like tour travel package situation.
Mm-hmm.
They were all wearing very bright hiking gear and hiking clothes.
Yep.
And so I thought for a moment and I said, well, maybe it's so they can find each other while they're traveling, right? They don't want to get lost. Like,
yeah,
Mr. Kim is over here, Mrs. Park is over here, and they can find each other easily. And that clip kind of went viral to an extent. I have got lots of messages from my friends over the years laughing at that clip, and people have sent it to me. And I guess it's making the rounds again on social media. So yeah, if you're in Korea and you search on social media, maybe you'll be able to hear me talking about hiking gear on the Korean news.
You should send that to me. I want to see it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's kind of funny. Jeremy, just before we wrap this up, there is one more thing we should talk about, and that is backpacking. Backpacking. So backpacking is when you travel, usually through Europe or Southeast Asia, but it could really be any place. You could travel through any place. When you don't take much luggage with you, all of your belongings are packed into one big backpack, and you travel only with that backpack, no other suitcases or anything else.
In fact, they call them backpacking backpacks.
Backpacking backpacks. I bought a backpacking backpack after I graduated high school with the plan to backpack through Europe with some of my best friends, but I never went. Anyway, Jeremy, have you ever been backpacking?
Yes, I have. I backpacked through Europe, I guess you could say, when I was younger. But really, it just felt like I had my suitcase on my back.
Well, you're a pretty minimal dude, Jeremy. I don't think you would necessarily have too many things with you when you go traveling. I couldn't see you with a bunch of luggage and suitcases, for example.
Yeah, I always try to minimize, especially when I travel. But I also could say that I went backpacking on that trip that I just mentioned, a multiple day hike. So technically backpacking is hiking for multiple days, carrying all of your belongings on your back. So usually food, tent, water, things like that. But we do use this term a lot when we talk about traveling through other countries. People say, I backpacked through Europe, I backpacked through Thailand, and the word backpack is used as a verb in this sense.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, when I think of backpacking or backpacking through a country, that is the preposition that we use, backpack through South America, backpack through Europe, I think of a young person, maybe fresh out of high school or in their 20s. I think of them sleeping in a hostel. I think of budget traveling, trying to travel while saving as much money as possible. And I think of riding the train or riding a bus as opposed to taxis or renting a car or something like this. I think in my mind, at least, I associate backpacking with budget travel that young people do.
And you can call those young people backpackers.
Great, Jeremy. Well, I think we were able to shed light on the different nuances between these words, trekking, hiking, climbing, and backpacking. And thanks again to Mina for this great question. We're going to leave it at here for now, everyone, but thanks for tuning in and thanks for studying English with us here today. If you enjoyed this episode and if you like Culips, then please support us. You can do that in many different ways, such as following us on social media, telling your friends who are learning English about Culips, leaving us a nice review and rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or signing up to become a Culips member. And remember, to become a Culips member, you can visit our website, culips.com. And if you want to check out our study guides, there are some free samples on our website. I think there are 6 episodes that you can view for free and see if Culips membership is right for you. If you have a question or a comment or a suggestion for a future Culips episode, just like Mina did, then get in touch with us by sending us an email to contact@culips.com. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, and we will talk to you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.